Well, hey guys, what's up everybody? Matthew here. Thanks for checking into the channel. Today I'm going to show you an incredible, old, ancient, Puritan note-taking system. It's an entire system for taking notes. It's a way to categorize all of your important information. Now, if you're a pastor like me or a professor or a writer, or maybe you're just interested in theology, or maybe you're really interested in anything. I don't care what it is. Could be botany, could be zoology, could be poetry. I don't know. If you are the kind of person that likes to take notes, though, on any particular topic, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to look at the system that Jonathan Edwards used. Now, I called him a Puritan earlier. Technically, he's a little bit late to be considered a Puritan because the Puritans were in the 1600s in England. And Edwards is a colonialist in the 1700s, so a little bit late. Nevertheless, his whole worldview is essentially Puritan. And Edwards created an amazing array of note-taking systems, all of which integrate together, and he did so before the advent of computers. And I'm going to tell you all about it here, and I'm going to show you how you can actually emulate some of these note-taking techniques in your own life. It's a system that I myself have been trying to emulate, and I'm going to show you how I've done that system as well in this video. So before we do that, let me first of all mention that if you're interested in Jonathan Edwards, I'm actually going to go over all of this stuff in my class, which I'm doing at RPTS, the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh in January 2025. You can come and you can learn some of this stuff in person with me in class if you'd like to do that. No pressure, but we can get you in, we can get you registered, we can get you in for that class. It's a 1-credit weekend class. I think it's going to be awesome. And while we're in that class, we're going to study this book right here, Edwards' Theology of Joy, which was essentially my published dissertation. So we're going to go over that as well. But here we're going to focus in on Edwards' note-taking system. So let me introduce you to the major components of this note-taking system and show you why it's so genius. Now, this is a layered system. And again, before computers, before searchable files, before Control F search, all that kind of stuff, Edwards, first of all, had a series of notebooks. Now, this is his bread and butter note-taking system. He would make these notebooks from hand. He would stitch them together with pieces of paper. He made his own journals, but thankfully you can go out and you can buy journals. You can buy all kinds of journals. And what Edwards did, first of all, in his miscellany system, which again is his bread and butter, he simply makes a numbered system for writing out notes. Notes on anything. And the reason they're called the miscellanies is because Edwards would write about all kinds of topics. Now, in his mind, the most important topics are the Bible, commenting on Scripture, theology, and philosophy. Those are going to be the interests of Edwards. A little bit of church history there as well too, but mostly, again, Bible, theology, philosophy with a little bit of church history thrown in. And anytime Edwards would have an idea that he wanted to remember forever, or perhaps even use later in one of his treatises or sermons or books that he's going to write, he would simply give that item a number, and then he'd write as much as he would want on that particular topic, and then he would go on to the next number. So let's say you started off with miscellany number 1. It could be on absolutely anything. Let's say it's justification by faith, and you write as much as you want on that topic, and then you go on to miscellany number 2. The next time you have an idea, maybe it's on the theological idea of adoption, and you write out miscellany 2, and so on and so forth you go. Now, here's the genius of the miscellany system. Although it's sort of random and haphazard as these ideas come into your mind, or maybe a new research article or idea comes onto your desk, he would create a indexing system wherein at the beginning of his miscellanies he would have a lot of space laid out. So he would number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. And then later he would write a 1-line or a 1-sentence description of that miscellany. So then he could go back and find that miscellany later as his index builds. Now, what's wonderful and remarkable about this system, even before computers, is that he could essentially search through his index and then go find that note. And as Edwards would fill up various notebooks, he would go on adding hundreds and even thousands of these miscellanies over his lifetime. Now, if that sounds pretty simple, sure, it is a little bit simple, but it's only because the system gets a little bit more complex that it actually also gets more genius. So secondly, Edwards had another kind of notebook that he called his Notes on Scripture. And once again, it would be exactly the same format. It would be numbered notes, and this time they would always be referenced to particular passages in the Bible. And once again, unfortunately for us, we'd wish they were kind of from Genesis all the way through Revelation in canonical order. Rather, they were simply in the order that Edwards thought up these ideas and wanted to take notes on particular passages. Now, it's a little bit arbitrary as to whether or not a note would go in his miscellany system or whether it would go in his notes on scripture system, but the one thing we can say is that his entire system of notes on scripture, also numbered from 1 to hundreds, that those would particularly and exclusively be notes that were related to the Bible. Now, later on, that numbering system is going to come back into play, and I'm going to show you exactly how that matters here in just a few moments. But let's then remark next that in addition to his miscellanies, which could be on various topics, and his other notebooks called Notes on Scripture, Edwards also had a very particular item, which thankfully you can actually buy something like this today, and I'll put a link in the description of this video if you want to get one. But Edwards had a blank Bible. Now, that's the name that he gave it. Actually, it had the whole text of the King James Version of the Bible, but it was a special Bible that was fabricated in which the whole text of the Bible was basically cut apart at its seams or its signatures and then restitched together with huge blank pages in between. And so Edwards would then take notes on the Bible and he would put it on the juxtaposing page so as if, let's see if my arrow's here. Yes, if he's commenting on the top of this particular passage, then this note would go over here on this page of the blank Bible. And so also if he was commenting on this section of the Bible, then he would put that note over here in this area. And if he was down here, then he'd be down here and so forth. And if you flipped over this page of the Bible, then he would also use the other side of the opposing page. Now, thankfully, we live in a day where there's all kinds of things out there. Crossway, in addition to other publishers, have blank Bibles that are actually made imitating this blank Bible, this unique Bible that Jonathan Edwards has. Now herein, if you're paying attention, this is where the system gets really incredible, because remember those numbered miscellanies, and do you remember those numbered notes on scripture that Edwards was building up in his other notebooks? Well, here in the Bible, then, he would also cross-reference those. So let's say, again, we had an entry on justification, and in our example, we're just making this up, it was number 1, miscellany number 1. Well, he could go to Romans chapter 5, and he could simply write a note, see miscellany number 1 on justification, and therefore he's adding all of these things to his blank Bible, and therefore the Bible itself begins to be something like a compendium of information wherein Edwards could source to all of his other notebooks. And herein is the genius, because of course, even with a blank Bible like this, eventually you're going to run out of paper, you're going to run out of space, you're going to run out of, Romans is going to have more notes than Leviticus, let's say. And so what you can simply do is cross-reference to other journals in which you have plenty more space to write all that you want. Just add paper or add journals to your system, and therefore all of Edwards's notes would begin to be integrated. And I'm going to show you an illustration of that in just a minute. But here's another picture of what the blank Bible looks like. You can kind of get a sense of the size and scope of this thing. It was a rather large Bible. But this also proved the benefit that when Edwards was traveling, let's say he was itinerating, preaching in another church, he was going around, he was going to go to Boston, whatever it is, Edwards could then bring his blank Bible with him, and this was sort of like his desktop, or his laptop, I guess I should say, or his mobile phone, where he has all of his information at his fingertips. Now, sure, it's a bit of a bear to carry around a big book like this, but it's a lot better than carrying around all of your files and drawers and notebooks where information is contained. And so Edwards would use the blank Bible as sort of like a landing spot where eventually all of the information that he's accumulating can be posited and then researched and looked up a little bit later. Now, there's other notebooks that Edwards had. So in addition to his notes on scripture, which was specifically for the Bible, and his miscellanies, which is a catch-all series of notebooks, Edwards would also fabricate particular notebooks for particular things. So for instance, he had a special notebook just on the book of Revelation, because he had so many ideas about that. He had all kinds of specific notebooks. He had one for controversies of things that he wanted to debate or things that he was wrangling with in his mind. He had some philosophical notebooks that he'd created. And then here's an interesting one right here that's on the screen. It's called Images of Divine Things. And this is where Edwards, whenever he saw the world, the natural world, whether it was a rose or the crying of a baby, or perhaps the difficulty of traversing a hill, or maybe even the rooster crowing in the morning, Edwards would see spiritual realities in these things, and he would write his images of divine things, in which the natural world for him was like portents or windows into spiritual and divine truths. And so this notebook was very interesting in my view. I've read the whole thing. It's really wonderful. And I would simply call this something like sermon illustration. So if you happen to be a preacher or a teacher, teacher or a writer or a poet and you want to keep together your ideas of things that just inspire beauty and joy in your life, then you could create a notebook specially for that as well. Now, in this illustration, let me see if I can move my face off the screen there for you a little bit better. This illustration shows where Edwards was positing most of his important information. So, whoops, let me jump back to that real quick here. So this block right here is his blank Bible, over 5,506 entries. His Divine Things had 200 entries. His Notes on Scripture, 500 plus entries. His Miscellaneous is huge notebook here, and he's got over 1,400 entries and so forth. He had other journals and note-taking devices as well. And basically this chronology down here, which is kind of messed up on the screen, unfortunately, shows you the date in which he begun those particular journals. And many of these he carried all the way to the very end of his life, especially blank Bible and Miscellaneous he was using throughout the most of his life. Let's go ahead and put my face back on the screen and let's click on to the next slide. Now, here's where I think that the genius of the Edwardsian system really begins to pay some dividends, and that is the way that these journals and notebooks would interrelate to one another. Edwards, of course, was a pastor, so he's always preaching sermons, but he's also writing treatises, he's writing letters, he's writing books. Edwards is writing pamphlets, sometimes in exchange with other theologians. And so this is where the system would all come together. So for instance, his sermons over here on the left of the screen, that would be influenced by various of his notebooks. His Miscellaneous, for instance, would inform his sermons. So also his blank Bible would inform his sermons. He had sermon notebooks and various things, and all of these were interrelated, and they were usually interreferenced to one another. So the Miscellaneous referenced the blank Bible references the Notes on Scripture, the images of divine things are found in his sermons, and here and then we can see this almost computer-like web of Edwards's information cataloging. And so I've actually tried to do this very same thing in my own life. I have my own blank Bible, which I purchased from Crossway, and I use it all of the time. But I've also started a few other notebooks. I have a theology and philosophy notebook that I use regularly. I have sermons, which I'm creating. I have a system of digital Miscellaneous where I skip the paper entirely and just go straight to the computer, and I put those in alphabetical order, and I can Control F search all of those things whenever I need them. I also have some written Miscellaneous, which you can see. Well, maybe you can't see it. It's right behind me, actually. Let's see. You can see this little notebook back there. Yeah, there it is. It's back behind me. My wide margin Bible, and all of this turns into eventually what's going to be my essays and my articles and my books. I'm also creating a personal diary similar to Jonathan Edwards did. And so in my view, you can integrate a digital note-taking system. If you like your computer, you like your phone, you don't have to jettison that at all. But you can also supplement it by using a blank Bible, such as the one I'm going to link from Crossway, or perhaps your own notebooks. If you still love using paper and pen, as I do, you can do all of that. You can integrate it into your Edwardsian system. All right. Well, if this has been even remotely interesting to you, remember, I'm going to go through this stuff, and I'll explain it in more detail in my class in January at RPTS, the Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary. In my view, the best seminary in the world. I'd love to see you in January. Thank you so much for checking into this video. I do love you lots, and we'll talk to you later.